Well, Captain Retard managed to post this video without any sound at all. I got some comments on that. This will be my first attempt to make a complete voiceover on a video. What happened here was that I did actually get access to a heated garage so I could dry out the van, and with no ventilation or fans in there, it was super moist inside there. Some of these panels that are made out of fabric was actually molded, so I have to pull them out. Also, I cannot attach anything to the walls when it's wet like this, and I think if I started like to clean away paint to repair rust, it would actually get worse. I would just like capsulate moist and it would rust under the paint and I wouldn't be able to see it. I brought my, I think it's 8 kilowatt heat cannon that made it super dry in there because it runs on diesel, so that dries out the air. The 2 days I had access to this heated garage, my plan was actually to get some insulation attached to the walls. I didn't get to that point, but I'm not disappointed anyway. This is a learning process. Everything takes more time than you anticipate. And I really learned a lot during this process, and I managed to like start to stipulate some plans on how to go ahead. Also, I got to organize some of this bloody mess in here. I was not sure on what cleaners to use, and here you can see it was so wet, it was dripping from the roof. So at first I thought it would just dry out on its own, and then I kind of recognized it was worth the effort of just drying it out with a cloth as well, just to reduce the drying time with the fan and the heat cannon. I was a bit reluctant to use this only towel I had because it's like a super expensive hiking towel. But in the aftermath, even if it gets ruined by glue residue or whatever, it was definitely worth it when I had access to this area and could really dry out the van. I did not want to like spend any extra time here just waiting it out. I think there was a total of 13 kilowatts drying power I had, and when it first started to dry out, it actually dried a lot faster than I expected. I was a little bit skeptical in the beginning if it would really get dry during the night, and that's also something that is important to recognize here. I was working through the night between my day jobs, so I had very little sleep these 2 days, and I could feel my head was just a mess. I tried to figure out what was like doable during this time, and I had several ideas and theories on where to start and isolate. Also, it was good to see the vehicle from above. I haven't been able to do that for a long time, and I was really relieved there was not more than a couple of rust spots, which I think is possible to just patch up when I'm installing the two max fans on the roof anyway. The dogs were enjoying, as always. We did some training in between when I was tired, and for some reason, Feynman just loved to lay there in the hottest area he could find in the van. These spots here are some kind of glue they used to put up the filt, and then I think they recognized it didn't work very well, so they went over to some spray glue instead. Those, I think it's Tech 7 or some Sikaflex glue. That really worried me if I were able to get those cleaned up during the night. I will show you more about that later. It's really a shame I didn't get to start with the insulation because the work table and all these accommodations would have just been great to measure up the Armaflex and start cutting it out and making stenciles, but that's life. That's life. Also, I had to be really careful with the heat cannon because we didn't have enough flame guard anymore because we had to disconnect some of the relays and stuff because the circuit board was fried. But as long as you can watch over it, it works great. I think here I'm trying to tell you about my plans for the van, and I want to use this ABS plastic to make a separate room in the back so I can have a separate wet room and I can put the dogs in, dry them off, and take them out on the inside of the van when they have dried up. This is where one of the Max fans would go, and it worries me, this rust where you see it's black. I put on rust milk, it's some acid. Here I'm trying to figure out what's the best way. Can you peel them off? I actually broke one nail trying to do that. So I had all kinds of different cleaners in all kinds of price ranges, and as you can see later, I actually put up tabs and try to do a test what worked the best. This one from Worth is really expensive, and I don't think I would use them if they're absolutely not necessary, because they are 4 times the price of what you get from Biltema, the outlet. But it was still interesting to do a blind test and see what worked the best. I think the effectiveness of these are actually controlled by how many danger icons they do apply. Luckily for me, this one with 4 warning labels was not that dangerous because I managed to spill that in my eye later. I think there's a clip of that where you can see they put the dye on my eye and everything. But this is one of the cheaper options. It doesn't say what it contains, but I think it's acetone and isopropanol in some kind of mixture. It's bought from an outlet store called Eula, but that worked great on a lot of the stuff inside the car. But the pleasant surprise in all these expensive chemicals was the label off from Biltema. This was the one I had the least confidence in, but on some of these problems or stuff that I needed to clean off the van, this one actually performed better than all the others. So really pleased by that. For painting over the rust, I also bought some cheap stuff from Biltema. It was what I had access to. I had to do all the shopping in a hurry. Another thing I hope to do with these 2 days in the garage was to file out all these holes and put rivnuts in them. But as I experienced, I didn't have any A4 rivnuts, and they also need to have this kind of grooves on the side, so I know they won't start to turn in the hole if I attach something heavy. It might be overkill, but I just want to do it like super properly before isolation and before covering up the walls. Most of the things I do with the van is overthinking and trying to make it absolutely nuclear, but I'm so afraid of something being hidden after I like covered up the walls and everything, and there's like damage or corrosion happening behind it. The plan for putting out the Armaflex was to make stencils out of this paper, just attach it with magnets, and then use the thick crayons, as you can see, to make an outline from the chassis. But I moved away from that idea, especially after working with this double-sided tape, because I just ended up having to clean it off and it didn't hold well enough when I was doing the outlines. I didn't get any film of that, but it was a dead end, but that's learning. The good thing was that a lot of this I had laying around already, and double-sided tape came off with a cheap label off, so I didn't have to use the really expensive products. My biggest fear was actually to damage some of the paint, and I had to like sand off and paint over it again to make sure it's no bare metal there. But I came out of that one pretty cheap. I have bought 3 rolls of Armorflex in the thickness of 10 millimeters, and I think those cost around 3,000 Norwegian, and this covers actually 10 square meters, and I think the 10 millimeter you are able to kind of get into adhere to the contours of the car. Then the plan is to, in those crevices that is covered with the 10, trying to put in 13 millimeters. I have bought some other isolation that I want to put outside of the Armorflex, because this is just going to be the main isolation and prevent condensation. I know there is like 100 different theories on how to isolate a camper van. This is what I came up with would be the best for a van that is going to be used in Arctic conditions and will have a lot of fluctuations in moist and temperature. The original panels that came with the van, they were full of fungi or rot, so I have actually cleaned them off, sanded them and painted them, but they only go into the contours of the cars, so you have the channels exposed to the interior, and that kind of becomes a thermal bridge and you get a lot of condensation there. So my plan now is to use the plywood and just cover down until some extruded aluminium that is going to hold the bed and actually be all along the way. And I think I will use 8 millimeters. As long as there's plenty of rivnuts in the chassis or the body of the car, it should be able to hold the wall. And I think 8 millimeter you can get to cohere to the curvature. But in the back of the car, I'm going to use plastic or this ABS and create like a wet room where I can dry up stuff, rinse off stuff. Also, I have a plan for the frame that goes around the max fans. I will show that in a later video. It's not fully carved out, but I don't want to put wood up to the metal. I really want something that is moist resistant around the fans. The plan is to have one fan in the front of the van and another one in the rear here at the wet room. And also this cage will be in this position, and I can put the dogs dirty and wet in on the wet zone, let them dry off and take them out on the other side of the van. I've been talking to a company that can actually do the welding of this plastic, so this room becomes almost completely sealed, and I think I can get someone to CNC a floor, so I get like a pan with a drainage on it, and then we can just warm up this ABS and get a super nice wet room. This might not become the most Instagram friendly van, but my main focus is working dogs and have a search and rescue slash working vehicle that I can live in, not the other way around. So it's absolutely framed around being able to work from the vehicle and also in the conditions we have here in northern Norway. Back to prepping the vehicle, there is always something that comes up when you really start to clean something, and one of the issues was like this micro rust between the plates here, and I'm really not sure on how to get to it so I can stop the rust and solve the problem before I seal it up. Also, I need to put some rivnuts in these plug holes. I thought they were already threaded so I could just bolt down from the top side, but it seems like it's some kind of plastic that is just sealed down there, and I want to put a unistrut down in this groove when we are installing the max fans and have the car inside the next time and have access to the roof. But I rather have slow progress than sloppy progress, because I might have this vehicle for years to come and have to work and live from it, or I have to sell it and get a proper price for it so I can actually buy the vehicle I want. And these videos will actually be some documentation I will forward to the potential buyer of this vehicle if I decide to sell it. And I really hope that they kind of appreciate the work you put into it and I can get a decent price. It's a little bit of a derailing. I want to be completely honest with a buyer if I sell this vehicle, so they don't get the same surprises I got. Anyhow, I think here I'm showing some of the areas that we started to clean up, and some of it went surprisingly well. The walls were super easy to clean up, but one thing I'm not sure of is if I should remove these supports that are actually there just to stop the panels from vibrating, or if they would be good enough just to cover them with Armaflex. Because one thing I'm afraid of, if there is a pocket there that doesn't have drainage, will it actually just hold the moist in that pocket and you get a huge rust problem you will not see before it's too late. So I started out with the super expensive product for getting some of this tape off. It seems like medical tape, and that was actually one of the worst things to remove, because when you got the glue off, the fabric also dissolved, so you couldn't continue to peel it off and you kind of had to scrape it off. And again, one of my big fears is actually damaging the paint. So either there's a hidden problem, or I do see it, but it creates a lot of extra work where I have to like sand it off, clean it, and paint it up again. This came off eventually. I could just use the brush and like brush a lot of it, and the fabric started to curl up. Here, one of my main concerns is how should I apply the Armaflex? Should I just like try to get it to cohere over the structures here? And again, will it create a pocket where there is already rust? Also, I figured out this kind of clips that hold the wires here on the cross beams made some scrapes in the paint, so I have to like file that off or sand that off and paint it over again. And I would definitely find another way to put up these wires. I was not sure if I could actually just put them through the beam, or if we're gonna put up some kind of conduit like plex tubes or something and thread all the electrical wires there. When I got to the point where I could actually start paint and cover up stuff again instead of just like cleaning, cleaning, and cleaning, I finally felt things moving ahead, even though I knew at this point I would not start to put up the Armaflex and I was way behind my desired schedule. But I think it's so important to remember it's a learning process, and the investment is in the work you have to do later. Now you know the chemicals to use, you know the tools you have to prepare, you know how long it takes, you know the conditions needed to get the job done properly, and that is so valuable. You can not only measure like the progress you are doing that day, it's just a part of a big puzzle to get the vehicle fixed. Here I'm actually arriving after being to the ER. I got this stuff on my eye and I had to lay there for an hour with the Morgan lens and rinse it out. I was really afraid when I got this on my eye. And I think one of the reasons I put myself in the situation where this could actually happen is that I was stressing. At this time I was like, oh, I'm only gonna clean that spot, and I didn't have the safety goggles. So this is why I think it's so important to have your tools prepared, your protection and everything, because this just cost me 3 hours I could spend on doing other things, and luckily for me I didn't get any vision damage. And I even thought about all this stuff I'm doing to get access to a garage, would it actually be better for me just to rent a garage and take that cost so I don't end up in these situations where I have a time limit, where my stuff is not organized and I just have to do it whenever I can? It's a really stressful thing, but hopefully as I move ahead in the project, the the tasks I will have to do should be less and less critical for the environment. So like when the fans are installed, when isolation is there, I could just be inside the van and working even though it's raining or snowing. But of course, you can't put in a roof fan when it's snowing. So you have to have the proper workshop, or you need to know the weather is good. Continuing to clean and fix stuff, of course, you discover new scars in the paint all the time. And this is also why I think it's important and not to be like on a super strict timeline, because then you would just like, oh, that's going to be fine, and you put isolation over it, and that comes and bite you in the ass 1 or 2 years down the road when that's a rust hole, and then you have to tear out interior and actually get someone to weld that hole. So here I think I'm actually explaining how well these different papers perform. This one is a little bit stiffer, a little bit glossy, so it was harder to get the crayons to mark on it and get it to adhere without having like folds. The other paper here actually tore quite easily, and again the mess with the double-sided tape. And at this point I realized I'm actually going to try to put the Armaflex from the seam here and all the way down, and just try with heat to get it to adhere to the different contours of the van. And then I will have sealed the channels and also all these holes. And I think it would give you less thermal bridges and be like a more consistent condensation barrier. But for sure, I don't want to clean up more than I have. So this double-sided tape, as I said, was a super dead end. But then we know, then we won't do that again. And maybe I save some time later down the line, but not redoing my mistakes. So at this point, I have realized there's no isolation going in the van this time. I wasn't that disappointed. I was more like, I just need to figure out something else that needs to be done with the van and spend the time as wisely as I could. That's fair enough. And there is always enough to do in a vehicle like this. So I started by like planning out where do I actually want to attach this extruded aluminium on the van, because I think most people just attach it to this channel, but I realized I need to have it a little bit higher up to go clear of the dog cages. And also, do I actually want to attach it directly to this channel with the thermal bridge? I don't think it's a good idea. I might just put some L-tracks there so I can tie down cargo. I will have to see. Also, I will put riv nuts in most of the holes that are already in the chassis. I don't see a reason not to do it. Also, I can't do anything from this lower beam and down to the floor because there is some rust issues there, and I need to do that in a garage where the van can be inside for at least a week so I can make absolutely sure it's done properly. So I spent some time also organizing my stuff, thinking about what I want to do in the van, what can I put up temporary so it gets easier to live there. Also, I spent some time trying to figure out if I could actually use the Adventure Wagon mule bags here, and where I did have to attach riv nuts so it gets tight when you put it up. It's quite critical. But I have actually, in retrospect, I moved away from that, and I think I'm going to use a pretty unconventional solution. I will, for the over cabinets, I will actually use I will actually use Milwaukee pack out system. I think it's better for me to use fixed cabinets up there instead of mold bags because it's so critical that you get the right distance between the attachments for the bag to stretch out. And I'm not precise enough, so I don't want to run that risk, and those bags are crazy expensive. So it would just complicate matters a lot for me. But the question is if I should put L-tracks here or some kind of extruded aluminium that can be a support and I can make for attachments along the van. Actually, I don't know, but we'll see. I definitely need some kind of modularity, even though I won't reach the level of the adventure wagon. I still want that same concept in my van. At this point, I'm just done with working and I need to get at least a couple of hours sleep. This is our sleeping solutions when we're working back in the van. The mattress is made of the same system as a stand-up paddle and it worked fairly well. Me and the two boys can actually sleep here. One of the dogs crawled between the seats and sleep on the floor, and the other one usually sleeps in my lap or something, and through the night they actually switch. I don't know what kind of system they have. It's definitely some advantages of having like a separate driver cabin like this, but it takes up a lot of length in the car, and I think the next van I have will be rotating seats so we don't have this wall. The boys were getting pretty tired at this point, and I think they were ready to go to bed, and I just had to push on and do a little bit more before we went to bed. Luckily for me, I finally found these plastic chisels that I bought from Biltema, because using the washing brush to take off some of this really hard glue was not sufficient. So 5% wiser from my last mistake, I actually did search for some protective gear, even though it looks kind of corny. I think it's worth it. These are really cheap protective glasses. The painting I was doing turned out way better than expected, and you have to remember I never did any painting like this before. These kind of scars I don't mind because I'm gonna cut out that piece to install the fan anyway. So that's just fine and dandy. I think this paint is fully cured at this time, and I really hope this, what do you call it, the primer is gonna seal off this rust spots really well, but it's been grinded down all the way to bare metal. But my main concern are these seams or lack thereof where all these plates come together. So let's see how that works out. I might not even isolate that this winter because I don't know when I can put the rib nuts for the unistruts up there, or if I even buy another form of roof rack. Time will show. This is dependent on my financial situation in the time to come. As many van builders, there is always compromises. There is this stuff I want to really have super nice and dandy, but it's so expensive that you have to find another solution. When I pulled out the mats and these panels on the doors, I could see there was a little bit more rust than I was comfortable with. So since I couldn't put in the isolation and stuff, I did decide that the paint was drying fast enough with all this heat, and the result was good enough. There was not too much of a difference between the original paint and the paint I bought. So I took my chances on actually starting that or derailing and do that project as well. And down here at the driver's door is where I get a lot of wear and tear. So I would actually see if this paint was good enough, if the way I'm doing it is good enough to stand the test of time. And this bloody holes again. I wished I had a step drill or something and I had my rib nuts, because then I would done that process as well. But I don't. And this is something I'm working on in the future, to be more prepared for the project and do my research and go online and actually order the parts so I can have them laying in store until I need them. So even though I don't know when I have access to a workshop the next time, I at least have all the materials I need to get started. And of course, like every time when you clean and you start to doing the details, you find more and more and more problems on these old cars. So I would definitely recommend to be prepared for this unknown stuff coming up. So when you have access to a workshop like I have, you have done your research and you know there can be a problem there, and you have the tools, you have the chemicals, just deal with it. Also, the van, I know it was anti-rust treated when it arrived to Norway. It was actually done on the docks, I think, by a company that took most of the sprinters. Uh, I also have a suspicion that there have been some damage on the car. They haven't told me, and I found several signs that the car have actually been repainted. Anyhow, I grind it down. As you can see, there's some digging rust here. There's like grooves in the metal. I think I got most of it. So it's going to be really exciting to see if it holds up. I was looking more into the driver's cabin, and I really wanted to see how it was under these steps, but these bolts are so rusted, I wasn't able to get them loose. So I need to do some proper research. Worst case scenario, I need to drill them and maybe retread the holes. But at this point, I decided that I will have to set aside a weekend, or at least a couple of days, pull out most of the stuff in the driver's cabin and just grind down and repaint and anti-rust treat. But that's fair enough. That's when I've gained this experience, I know that threshold for doing that job will be a lot less than it was a year ago when I bought the van. So this time the whole thing was an ad hoc operation, so I haven't been able to show how the cleaning goes when I'm doing it. These spots you could see in the roof, they were one of my huge concerns because they were so hard, and that's why I'm glad I found these plastic priors, because they work really great. They give before the paint, so I don't damage the paint, and I can actually just like hammer a little bit on them, because my shoulders hurts a lot from working with my hands over my head. This time I actually decided I would be systematical in the approach. So after I chiseled off the main glue there, I decided I would actually put labels on some spots that was quite equal, and test all the different chemicals. And here, of course, you can see the chisel and hammer I used. What I forgot to say about the doors, I did put rust milk over before priming and painting, and then most of this is washed off by acetone. Here are the different projects. As you already been told, the Wurt is the expensive one. The label off is the one I had the least confidence in. This one, I know it's painful to get in your eyes, but it worked great on glue and other stuff, especially this spray glue that's been used in the roof. Sticker X, disappointing. Silicone remover didn't do much, and the industrial cleaner was like on the middle of the tree. And as you can see, I did mark up similar spots just to be absolutely sure that I got things right during this test. Because I'm impatient and I'm definitely a hammer and nail guy. I have so little experience in this that I treat everything like a nail, so I just hammer it in. And I need to get my stuff ordered, so I actually do proper research. And also, I shouldn't postpone things. I should just buy different chemicals and test it on these spots before I have access to a garage and can do the whole thing. So that's a huge learning point. Do whatever you can. And this is something I'm going to uh, making the videos about Jordan Peterson's living his 12 rules of life. There is always something you can do. And that has been a mantra that I'm a little bit ashamed of in this van build. I haven't just like set aside time and it's like, this I can do today. Don't worry about all the things you can't do. I can do this. And that's where I need to push on further on in this build. But from 10 years in the military, is there one thing I've learned? That is, you will achieve wisdom from learning by burning. I got back to my cabin after 2 days of very little sleep and no eye damage, luckily. As you can see soon, the cabin is also a huge mess because I need to drag things in there, dry them up, and they are in the way of things I want to organize. And stuff that should have been in the van are now in the cabin, and I haven't been able to organize all my tools. And when I want to use the tool, it's broken because I used the wrong batteries. So it becomes another project and I don't know where to start. But I can say that this much, these mats are back. I fixed this circular saw and now we are finally getting some stuff done, and I think it's going to be easier and easier to tick off small projects. Of course, it's going to help when it's summer and I can do some of this stuff outdoors instead of having access to a garage because the weather here have been shifting so much. Again, sorry for releasing this video with no audio. I know this is not the best voiceover, but I just need to get it pushed out there and get on with the next video. And I think both my van, my videos, and myself will improve. Thanks.